Have you ever seen someone change their mind out of nowhere, believing it was entirely their own choice? Have you ever wondered how certain people seem to slip into others' minds without them even noticing? We're not talking about magic, stage tricks, or mystical powers. We're talking about a real, subtle psychological method, so effective that it was banned from numerous courses for being deemed too manipulative. Imagine having the ability to steer thoughts, prompt decisions, and even reshape beliefs, using only everyday words in casual conversation. This isn't fiction, it's psychology, and in this video, you'll discover how it works and why few people discuss it openly. Get ready to understand the hidden power of language, and if you believe the human mind is sacred, leave a comment below saying, "True control is imperceptible." The human mind has always been a mystery, and at the same time, a highly moldable tool. Few scholars have explored this frontier as deeply as Jacobo Grinberg. A Mexican scientist, Grinberg dedicated his life to understanding how consciousness creates reality. He claimed that the world we perceive isn't fixed, but rather a projection of the mind's internal structures. That includes emotions, beliefs, and yes, external suggestions. By combining neuroscience, psychology, and spiritual traditions, Grinberg revealed that reality can be altered simply by shifting mental patterns. It was at this point that he began studying how language influences those patterns, paving the way for practices like conversational hypnosis. According to him, the mind doesn't resist what seems to come from within. If a suggestion is subtle enough, it takes root as though it were an original thought. This view is backed by modern discoveries about the reticular activating system, which filters our perception based on internal beliefs. When someone uses language to align with those filters, they can effortlessly direct another person's focus without friction, without resistance. What you're about to see is the step-by-step breakdown of this method. Ethical or not, that depends on how you use it. When people hear hypnosis, many imagine someone asleep, eyes closed, obeying commands like a zombie. But that's a myth, a theatrical version that obscures the true essence of this powerful tool. Real hypnosis doesn't rely on closed eyes or a spotlighted stage. It can occur with eyes wide open in a seemingly ordinary conversation, over coffee, during a meeting, or even in a simple chat among friends. Conversational hypnosis is the state in which someone's mind focuses so deeply on a single idea that they accept it without resistance. This doesn't mean losing control. It means allowing certain mental filters, chiefly skepticism, rigid logic, and resistance to the new, to soften. In other words, it's like planting a seed directly into the fertile soil of the subconscious without triggering any alarms. The secret lies in three elements: attention, connection, and subtle suggestion. Attention is the first step. The mind can only be influenced when it's truly focused. That means crafting an engaging conversation where the person feels emotionally connected and genuinely heard. That connection can't be forced. It must arise through genuine empathy, active listening, and real presence. Once that connection exists, subtle suggestion comes into play. And here's the magic of conversational hypnosis. It never issues direct commands or imposes ideas. It guides. Instead of saying, "Do this," you say, "What if you began to think differently?" The idea doesn't feel imposed from outside, but presents itself as a natural conclusion from within. It's as if the mind says, "That makes sense, and it was my own thought." This process can unfold in seconds or minutes, depending on the person's receptivity and the skill of the conversationalist. But when executed masterfully, the results run deep. Opinion changes, new decisions, behavioral shifts, all without confrontation, without resistance, and often without the person fully realizing why they changed their mind. This is not magic. It's applied psychology. It's the art of speaking to the unconscious through the open doors of conscious conversation. But how does one apply it with ethics, depth, and clarity? For that, you need to know the three phases of the so-called invisible method, a silent influence model so potent that it was removed from many courses due to its high persuasive power. Before any suggestion can be accepted, you must first secure something invisible yet fundamental, the mind's permission. And this permission only comes when there's a connection. Silent rapport is the foundation of that connection, a deep attunement that occurs without explicit words, but establishes a direct bridge to the other person's unconscious. The human brain is wired to recognize familiar patterns. When someone mirrors our posture, tone of voice, or speech cadence, we automatically lower our defenses. The unconscious mind interprets this as a signal of safety. This person is like me. And when that identification occurs, resistance melts away. That's the power of mirroring. Mirroring isn't mechanical imitation. It's subtle, almost imperceptible. If the person speaks slowly, you adjust your pace slightly. If they gesture with their right hand, you do the same. If they pause for longer breaths, you respect that rhythm. This creates an energetic alignment, a shared cadence, leading to unconscious connection. Silent rapport isn't limited to behavior. The content of what you say matters too. When you validate emotions, share similar experiences, and show genuine empathy, the other person's mind begins to trust you. That trust isn't rational, it's felt. Have you ever had the sense of knowing someone for years, even though you just met? That's the impression silent rapport creates. It builds a field of trust without you ever having to say, "Trust me." Another powerful aspect of this phase is calibration, paying attention to what isn't said, micro-expressions, tone shifts, subtle reactions. As you become sensitive to these cues, you adjust your approach in real time, deepening that invisible bond. Neurologically, this activates the so-called mirror neuron system, which makes the other person's brain experience what you feel. It's like tuning into the same emotional frequency, creating a harmony that opens doors to suggestion. So the golden rule here is, be natural. Forced rapport reads as manipulation, triggering defenses. But when there's genuine presence, active listening, and respect for the other, rapport emerges with silent strength. Once connection is secure, the mind begins to open, and is then ready for something new. But there's still one barrier: the logical flow of thought. To breach that, we move to the next phase of the invisible method: pattern interruption and the trance door. The human mind mostly runs on autopilot, following predictable mental routes. Resistance arises when the mind is comfortable in the familiar and rejects the new. To let a suggestion in, you must momentarily disrupt this logical flow. That's where pattern interruption comes in. This technique creates a moment of mild disorientation, a subtle interruption that breaks the habitual thought line and in turn opens a crack in rational resistance. This crack is known as the trance door, a brief state of vulnerability where the unconscious becomes more accessible. You can trigger this break with something as simple as an unexpected question. For example, have you ever noticed how some ideas slip into our minds as if they'd always been there? That question doesn't seek a rational answer. It suspends reasoning, diverts logic, and makes room for something new. Another effective approach is to use slightly illogical statements that provoke momentary confusion. Sometimes when you try to relax, you realize that relaxing is the only way to concentrate. The mind tries to make sense and can't immediately. In that moment of searching, it pauses. That pause is the perfect window to introduce a suggestion. With no clear pathway, the brain will accept what seems most natural, especially if it comes from someone with whom rapport is already established. It's like a controlled distraction. The conscious mind is busy trying to interpret while the suggestion slips in through the cracks. And the most fascinating part? This mini trance happens with eyes open in the midst of conversation. The person keeps talking, interacting, but part of them is attentive and absorbing more than they realize. In practice, this moment can occur at any point in the exchange. You might trigger it with a sudden shift in speaking rhythm, a light touch on the shoulder, or a penetrating glance accompanied by an enigmatic statement. The break must be subtle yet real, surprising without startling, confusing without disconnecting. In that newly formed mental space, the next step is to plant the desired idea, not directly, but embedded in language, as if it were the person's own thought. That brings us to the next stage: embedded suggestion and hidden commands. Now that connection is established and the rational mind interrupted, you enter the method's most delicate and potent phase, planting an idea without it feeling imposed. The art of embedded suggestion is the ability to influence a decision or perception so that it seems to emerge spontaneously from the other person's mind. This is achieved through hidden commands, indirectly structured phrases that bypass conscious judgment and are absorbed directly by the unconscious. You don't say "do this" or "think that." Instead, you use expressions like "you might begin to notice that certain changes happen naturally." Perhaps, at some point, you'll feel a desire to act differently. It's fascinating how sometimes we shift without really knowing why. These statements don't trigger defenses. They work because the brain doesn't perceive them as threats or impositions. On the contrary, they sound like inner reflections, natural thoughts, and that's precisely what makes them so effective. The key is to plant the idea in the future, in the realm of might, never in the realm of must. This way, the mind receives the suggestion as a safe possibility, free of resistance, and the more emotionally aligned the person is with you, the more they allow themselves to consider this new option. Another powerful tactic is intentional ambiguity. Phrases that can be interpreted in multiple ways invite the mind to fill in the gaps with personal meaning. This forges an unconscious link between the suggestion and the person's own experiences. For example, some decisions only make sense when something inside us changes. The answer you seek might already be there, waiting for the right moment. These sentences carry no direct command, but activate deep zones of reflection. When paired with subtle gestures, tonal shifts, or strategic pauses, you anchor the suggestion in the bodily experience. It's important to remember, this isn't brute manipulation. It's a delicate dance between intention and sensitivity. Embedded suggestion only truly works when empathy and ethics are present, because even an unconsciously receptive mind senses malicious intent and raises its defenses. True mastery comes from using these tools to expand possibilities, not to control. You can guide someone toward a wiser, lighter, more aligned choice without ever stripping them of their power to choose. You might be asking now, if this technique is so subtle and effective, why was it banned from so many courses? Any powerful tool carries a risk, that of being used with warped intentions. That's exactly what happened with the invisible method of conversational hypnosis. Originally created as a form of deep communication to facilitate positive change, unlock trauma, and help people access their best selves, it was later distorted in the wrong hands, and thus banned. Many hypnosis and NLP courses removed these techniques from their core curricula. Why? Because they discovered the methods being exploited for aggressive sales tactics, emotional manipulation in relationships, and even unethical political persuasion. The method worked so well that in unscrupulous hands, it manufactured a false sense of choice when the path had already been directed. This realization caused serious discomfort within the therapeutic and educational communities. What was meant to be a channel for transformation became viewed as a psychological weapon. And although the technique isn't illegal, its use was discouraged by many reputable professionals. After all, we're dealing with the human mind, the most sensitive, sacred, and vulnerable territory of all. That ban wasn't institutionalized, but it happened in practice. Manuals were rewritten, terms changed, and the content diluted or omitted altogether. The method didn't vanish, it simply stopped being taught openly. It continued circulating in the shadows among specialists and strategists aware of its power. and who, sadly, didn't always intend to use it for good. The truth is, these techniques are morally neutral. What determines whether they heal or harm is the user's intention. When applied with respect, they can help someone overcome trauma, conquer a limitation, or make a choice aligned with their heart. But when used to exploit, they can foster emotional dependency, impulsive decisions, and even unconscious guilt. That's why understanding the reason behind the ban is crucial, not to instill fear, but to remind us that knowledge carries responsibility. Anyone who wields this method holds in their hands a silent, almost invisible power, yet profoundly real, a power that can transform or manipulate. Now that you've seen this side of the story, it's time to learn how to apply it with awareness, ethics, and purpose. Because true power isn't about controlling others, it's about inspiring them to awaken on their own. Understanding the mind's workings is like receiving the keys to a precious and fragile safe. When you know how to guide someone to accept ideas without resistance, you also assume a silent responsibility to use that power to heal, guide, and liberate, never to dominate. Ethical influence begins with one principle. Do not push someone toward an idea, but open pathways for them to discover it themselves. A true master doesn't impose, they awaken, and that requires sensitivity, presence, and above all, respect for the other's pace and pain. Whether you're talking to someone anxious, fearful, or confused, conscious conversational hypnosis can soothe, bring clarity, and plant confidence where there was chaos. You can use this technique to help someone make a positive decision, overcome a fear, or dissolve a limiting belief that keeps them trapped in suffering. The rule is simple. Never use this knowledge to gain an advantage over another. The line between influence and manipulation is thin, but always perceptible to those guided by ethics. If your intention is to steer someone toward a choice you want, rather than what's best for them, you've already crossed that line. Influence is not control, it's inspiration. True authority is silent. It arises from the trust built through listening, empathy, and non-judgmental presence. When someone feels truly understood, there's no need to convince them. They find the answers within. The ultimate principle of this method is clear. The mind is influenced when the ego falls silent. The less you push, the more openness you create, the subtler your language, the deeper it penetrates. The more you respect the other's process, the more genuine transformation can occur. Use this method as a bridge, not to lead someone to what you want, but to what they need to discover on their own. Be a guide, not the owner of the path. Because when suggestion is used with love and awareness, it becomes liberation. Whether in therapy, human relationships, or everyday conversations, this skill can be a beacon amid someone's emotional darkness, a light that doesn't blind, but reveals. And now that you know the secrets behind invisible influence, only one decision remains. How will you use this knowledge from today onward? True power isn't shouting orders, it's planting ideas with wisdom. What you've learned here is more than a technique. It's a responsibility. Knowing how to influence someone's mind is like touching an invisible string that can resonate for days, weeks, or even transform an entire life. If you apply this knowledge consciously, you can be the one who soothes, guides, and leads without imposing. You'll have the chance to be a rare presence in this world, someone who speaks to the soul, not the ego, and that is unforgettable. Now, I invite you to take the next step. Use what you've learned for good. Practice, observe, refine, and when you notice the impact you can make, always choose the path of ethics. If you want to continue exploring the mysteries of mind, language, and consciousness, subscribe to the channel. Let's dive even deeper together into this hidden yet essential universe. And don't forget to leave in the comments the phrase that marks those who understand the true power of influence. True control is imperceptible, because the mind doesn't need to be dominated, it just needs to be awakened.